Yeah. So your name's Darko. I'm saying that correctly, yeah?
Yes, my name is Darko.
Okay, man. Well, pleasure. I'm Cheyenne. I've been following your stuff for a little while, actually. And fun fact, because obviously you do a lot in terms of content creation and stuff like that, and you do a lot of really good motivational stuff, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, there's a whole story where your account got deleted and everything like that. But surprisingly enough, I don't know whether you might be shocked by this, but I actually only discovered you since your new account.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I have absolutely no fucking idea what you were doing before that, but
It's not all the fun.
Yeah, well, I think you've been doing a great job, man. I think I discovered you back in December, which is, I think, around the time where that happened. One of my friends, Ross, from the band Necro Ritual in the UK, a great band. I saw him sharing some of your stuff, and then that's how I got introduced to some of your posts. So yeah, I think you're doing a fucking good job, man. But yeah, so tell us a little bit what happened. What did I miss out, and what did anyone else who's listening? What have they been missing out?
The deletion was actually, I think, somewhat of a blessing in disguise, because it allowed me to start off fresh again. And also I had some problems with Instagram as it is, because they were kind of suppressing my message. Who knows why? I used to believe that there was like this kind of covert action going on and kind of this conspiracy of like trying to suppress positive notions. But it turns out actually it's much less grandiose than that. It's basically that Instagram, the actual customer support is actually run completely by an AI. So the AI dictates what content gets published, what doesn't get published, and also even more ridiculously, the AI dictates who gets deleted and who doesn't. I actually thought that my suppression was kind of planned out, not really planned out, but kind of not accidental. But it turns out actually something happened around December of 2021, where quite a lot of people got deleted for no apparent reason at all. And you can say that Instagram trying to suppress maybe my kind of message because it might be a little bit edgier, or it might not be the generic live, laugh stuff. But actually, it turns out that people were being taken down for the most generic content as well. People were posting their cats and they got taken down. So there are no rules. But basically, a long story short, I bounced back out of it. Obviously, I took a hit, but at the end of the day, we're just moving on now and kind of spreading. The message is everlasting and it's greater than me itself. So it will always get across.
You mentioned something there where you said that your message is maybe like a little bit more edgier, or maybe like a little bit more outlandish compared to the other stuff there. But really, I think what you're putting out there is actually far more normal and what should be out there compared to some of the other crap that's there, that's to just like fuck with people. I mean, I'll make an example here for you, since we're onto that subject right off the bat. The previous episode that I did, or the last two, my focus was actually very much on how society is almost designed in a certain way to make the individuals weaker, especially men in general. Like where you see all these articles at the moment, which I think I've seen you post about that as well, where you see all these articles and things where they're very almost blatantly trying to discourage men, especially younger men, to partake in physical activity, in bettering themselves, becoming better human beings, becoming stronger. And I think that sort of message is needed to let people know of that. So what's your sort of mission in this? What is it that, let's say, besides your own personal goals, that you're actually trying to accomplish in this sort of situation?
Well, I don't hide this, but the primary reason that there are two primary reasons why I have my Instagram. The first one is to market my business, because obviously I'm a strength and hypertrophy coach. The second reason is kind of to share my creative outlook and kind of my writing. Now, outside of that, the grand goal, at least what I would like to achieve, and I think I tend to view everything from a micro and a macro perspective, and I think that is somewhat being done, not necessarily just because I'm doing it, but because it's like a cascade of events. Is to basically create a new culture. I've been obsessed with the idea of culture for a very long time, and I believe that culture is a pretext for any significant change. I believe that once a certain culture persists and thrives, it kind of basically infects every other aspect of society and humanity as it is. So, and kind of what we're seeing now, and kind of what you mentioned, I tend to not view things in a very, how should I say, specific fashion, in the sense that I believe that maybe some cabal is orchestrating that man should get weaker, and I believe that it's much less grandiose than that, like with the Instagram analogy. But there is definitely a trend which is inherently destructive. In a Nietzschean context, it's life denying, and that is this: we should just embrace who we are, but not in the sense of like the things that we cannot change. Like, let's say if you are born with cerebral palsy and or you're handicapped and you cannot change that's something that you should absolutely embrace, or any other things that we cannot change. But if we should embrace generally the things that we can influence in a significant degree, our body composition, our mental state, our cognitive state, and if we should embrace that, we're effectively not only embracing mediocrity, which is opening a can of worms on its own, but we're also effectively limiting our own potential. And now that's for certain businesses, for certain scenarios, that is very beneficial. It's a very beneficial thing if you are. I only realized this recently, kind of to go on a different tangent, but oftentimes when you're like in a relationship like I am, in a longer one, you obviously go into shopping centers and etc. and things like that, and you kind of see how women dress. And one of the things that I've noticed maybe in the past 2 years is that a lot of women dress identically. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And it kind of, that made me think about a lot of other things, and it kind of made me facilitate my worldviews, is that if everyone is identical, everyone is the same, we're all the same, we're all in this together. And if we're all marketed this idea, it's a very convenient idea to sell, because if you are offering something, you don't have to think about the demographics of your consumer market or anything like that, basically because the consumer market is identical. So I think, and also because of now, if you want to go in a bit of a different direction, if you pacify the most dangerous parts of your population, that obviously allows certain action to be done. Because I mean, we're now living in the most ideal time in human development, and
Correct.
A couple of thousand years ago, I'm 25, and a couple of thousand years ago, I was expected to have children, to go to war, hopefully survive, and build a complete civilization. And also that kind of, although all the positive thing that brings, it also is a lot of, burden for a society, because if you train and condition your population to be in this manner, they can also do whatever they want if they decide that the government isn't good for them. So if you strip and pacify the most, primal and violent part of the population, that obviously brings some good things with it, but it also brings a lot of catastrophic things. So is this orchestrated on purpose or not? I don't know. I just know it's inherently life denying, and it's destructive for the general, all of humanity, but generally for the average person out there.
I think that's a very fair point. Back to what you said about people being perhaps more, there's a higher likelihood of them being disobedient if they have more strength of character, if they are like physically stronger and these things. You see that in the last 2 years. You look at who was, I don't want to get into that particular subject as such, but I'm making a general point of, you compare the general people who follow what's being spread, and then you look at the people who are like, no, this is bullshit, why are we doing this? And you see that sort of difference in there, and I think you see that in exactly what you just mentioned. I'll make a really good example here as well. It's a terrible situation, but I come from Iran, and in my home country, obviously there's a lot of people who are really fucking unhappy with the government, whether it's just from the whole Islamic way that things are run and how limiting it is, especially on the women, but on the men as well, how culturally restrictive it is. And one of the things that comes to mind is, well, Right. So you got a population and you got a few in control. Out of the entire population, who are the people that are most likely to actually overthrow the government? That would be, generally speaking, the young adults, especially the males, because, well, you've got quote unquote manpower. You know what I mean? And that's like,
how much
that's
of that
the
is
thing.
now present is questionable.
Well, exactly, because the reason is like the way I think. I don't. Again, it's hard to judge how intentional this is. But for example, in Tehran, we have like a serious drug problem. You know, where you got heroin, even crocodile from.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. You're familiar with crocodile, yeah?
Yeah, I've heard about it. As far as I know, it's like an urban myth. But who knows? I don't really have a lot.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that is something that actually exists in Tehran, and there's the theory that the government themselves are purposely putting these things out through the black market, you know, because why? Well, you can't go to a pub to have a good time with your friends. You know, there's a lot of things you can't do. You can't go to like gigs and stuff. I mean, I come from a black metal background, you know, so my life was like under threat whilst I was over there.
Definitely.
And when, as a guy or anyone really, when all of your outlets are sort of boxed in, it's like you can't do anything. You're either gonna turn into crime, or you're gonna turn into overthrowing the government, or you're gonna find something that just gives you the relief that doesn't make you wanna like just, you know, like have a fucking meltdown. And that's why like drugs, like these hardcore drugs, can be very popular, because they're the escapism that's offered to a lot of people there. So our young population, to make the story short, is basically hooked on those kind of drugs, because I believe the government wants them to be in that situation. So they're not expanding too much further out of their own reach, if you catch my drift.
Now that's interesting, because it kind of proves a point now, obviously considering that is true, because it kind of directly conflicts with the national, not the national, but the governmental policy. And that is, now I don't know much obviously about the Middle East. I have generally, out of all of the Middle East, I have the most amount of positive influences and positive thoughts for Iran, because obviously Persia, because of obviously Mesopotamia, that entire region. I kind of have really positive views on that. That being said, it's called the Islamic Republic of Iran. And actually, up until I didn't notice that they had the drug problem, but I would actually consider that the government would actually try to suppress that, because that's like totally against the religious and social norms. But then again, you see the government actually effectively doing the complete opposite for the sake of control. It's the same thing as, again, not to go political, but I mean, the liberal leaders of the world, the ones who praise democracy all the times, are the first one who are going to act anti-democratically when their structures of power are threatened. We saw this in Canada. I mean, it legitimately, I'm obviously from Serbia, so obviously we have our own problems over here, but I was legitimately angry when I saw what was going on in Canada, because there was this entire protest of truckers who were like against these COVID regulations. And now you can think about that whatever you want, but objectively speaking, they were peaceful. Like they didn't do anything. They even distanced themselves from the violent or extreme parts of the protests. And what did the government decide? Well, when they realized that they cannot crack them in the conventional means, basically trying to demonize them and etc. When they realized that the majority of the population is on their side, they effectively went down the authoritarian rabbit hole, and they stripped their bank accounts, they stripped their crypto accounts, they said that they're going to lose their jobs, etc., etc. So we're always seeing this concept of the government acting completely, how should I say, differently to the ideals that it's supposedly promoting, and that's something that I objectively despise. I can literally have more respect for an authoritarian government, let's say North Korea. I can have more respect for them, even though what they are doing, because they're not trying to pretend like they're democratic. Now, obviously, they have DPRK in their name, but everyone knows they're not a democratic country. But when you're pretending to be something, at the end of the day, you're just cynical, and that's something that I cannot really comprehend, and I cannot really support in any capacity.
Well, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the most common things that I have said to a lot of my close friends especially in the last 2 years, is that I am someone who was actually born and raised in a country that's very, obviously under a dictatorship, where we've got our own supreme leader, and whether that's the right or the wrong, I don't want to even get into that.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
the point that I'm trying to make is I come from a place that is run by these sort of authoritarian set of values, and that it is seeped into the entire societal structure. Now, all I have seen in the last 2 years, and this includes the British government, this includes the American government, the Canadian, Australian, Austria, everywhere. These people have been acting exactly the same way as my government acts back in Iran. And it is sad to me that most of the people over here cannot see that, and they cannot understand how deep the whole rabbit hole of authoritarianism can go. And, I mean, Peterson said a really good thing on this before, by the way, I had no intentions of making this a political podcast, but here we are. Okay.
But
I think it was meant to happen.
Interestingly enough, 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been considered a political debate. We're talking about the basic notions of freedom and fighting authoritarianism. Now, we would assume that this is something that the average individual can get behind. But then again, this is becoming questionable, which effectively tells you that we're living in a very, very interesting times when questioning authoritarian measures is becoming dangerous. So that tells us a lot about what the climate that we're in.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing that I was actually trying to say as well, or what Peterson was saying was, I mean, this is like a very old podcast as well. This is from like fucking years ago, but he made a very valid point. And he's like, if I'm going to encroach on you, I'm going to do that just a little bit until to the point where you start to get agitated about it. Then I sort of hold back. Then I keep getting more. And then they keep repeating that process. And then all of a sudden you've gone from point A to point E, and it's like
slippery slope policy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, I was, I understand people, because people just want to get on and live their lives. And, that's all we want. But unfortunately, it's not that fucking simple, and if someone is trying to take away your rights, you've got to fucking stand up for it. And that's just my personal belief.
It's kind of one of the things that you have heard multiple times. I have heard multiple times, et cetera, et cetera. But anytime the question of World War II comes up, a lot of people raise a very, I would say, legitimate question. And that is that there was a lot of evil going on in that time frame. And a lot of people will say, well, why didn't these guys just fight the Nazis? Why didn't these guys just save the Jews? I would have done it. If I don't know, if Germany invades today and decides to kill, I don't know, all the Portuguese people or something like that, I would hide them in the attic and the cellar, et cetera, et cetera. If evil came, I would be the person who would defy it. And it's kind of like, well, that time has come and you're on their side.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's an unfortunate, but in reality, if you study human psychology and kind of how generally humans behave, this isn't all that uncommon. We just have a very naive perception of reality. Now, obviously, you come from Iran, so that brings in a whole bunch of experience from that. I come from Serbia. Now, we kind of, both of our countries have a little bit of a history.
Sure.
And I personally, since I'm born in 96, I was 3 years old when the bombing happened. So I kind of somewhat experienced the war, but also how much can you experience at 3 years old? But the interesting thing is that the consequences of that facilitated it even up to this day. And we are kind of, I feel like the people or the nations or the cultures that went through kind of traumatic periods in their recent history are kind of the ones who are more aware of problems when they arise or before they arise. I have a lot of British friends. Majority of my friends are also, talking abroad, are also from the States. They're an incredibly great people. Some of the best people that I've ever met. But one of the things that the United Kingdom and the United States cannot comprehend is being invaded, is being bombs thrown in your courtyard. Now, obviously, the United Kingdom had problems with the Troubles in Ireland, but again, they were kind of all isolated a little bit from the real problems of the world, and then they don't have experience like maybe we do, because you know what authoritarianism, because you experienced it. But the average, I don't know, some guy from Edinburgh whose, let's say, biggest problem is the pub closing at maybe 2 hours earlier, or maybe Jack Smith from Wisconsin who cannot watch his game. That's maybe his biggest problem. And they kind of don't really have a general perception of how bad things can go and how bad things can go really fast. So once you have that experience, it's like an old Serbian proverb says, a person who was bitten by the snakes will fear also the lizards. So kind of once you have that experience, you kind of know how to tread carefully.
Yeah, of course, because it's something that's just on the TV. It's over there. This doesn't include us, you know.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that is everywhere, it's like, oh God, we don't know what to do. You know what I mean? And it's I do completely agree with you. There's I mean, as far as Britain or the United Kingdom itself goes, there are. I mean, I talked about this in the previous episode in very sort of summarized way, but there's a lot of systems intact that pretty much get you kind of hooked down in one spot all your life, you know. And it's like what you need is there, you know. You don't need to grow past that, you know. And it's almost like you see this in a lot of European countries as well, where it's like the growth of the individual is almost like a negative thing, you know. I mean, what I'm gonna say might come across as a little bit edgy here, but it's just, this is my perspective coming from where I come from and what I've seen. But they, I mean, at least like in the case of the UK, you know, sometimes they'll take a lot of pride in like their ways of capitalism. Yet, if you work too hard, you will get punished for it. If you work too many hours, they'll tax you in such a way that it's almost like you may as well had not worked any of those extra hours. You know what I'm saying?
Accidentally.
Yeah, you know, and it's like I've noticed. I've just been in Norway a couple of months ago, and I noticed the same thing over there when I was speaking to people. And it's like, well, shouldn't you be rewarding hard work? Shouldn't you be wanting people to excel in your society and do better for you?
Yeah, but that's all of Scandinavia is like that. I was in Denmark a couple of years ago, and also I also have a lot of Scandinavian friends. And kind of one of the things that I noticed in Denmark, because there wasn't a lot of expensive cars. So you see, for instance, a lot of new cars. You'll see maybe a new Golf. You might see maybe a new, I don't know, Toyota. But you won't see anything all that expensive. Now, I don't care at all about cars, but kind of one of the things Serbs generally like is cars. So that's kind of one of the complexes of living in a poor country, is that you have to flash the money you don't have, as we joke around here. So over here, it's not, I mean, I live in a relatively small town. I mean, the average salary over here is like 400 euros. So it's really not that good. But I mean, you get to see some really expensive cars. You see G-Wagons, you see really expensive Mercedes. A Porsche here isn't that uncommon. Just walking today to the gym, I saw a Bentley. So and this is a town of 70,000 people. So nothing extraordinary. But when I went to Denmark, I didn't see all that. And as far as I knew, Denmark was an extremely wealthy country. And one of the things that I asked them, like, so do people here not like expensive things? And no, they told me something very interesting. And they said, well, the government taxes you to living hell for that new car. And they basically said it doesn't make any sense for you to buy it. And so it's kind of that interesting thing. Again, I know that it has certain benefits. Again, I'm not an economist, so I can't really talk about it. Their argument is, well, we're going to pay a lot in the taxes, but then everyone is kind of going to be a little bit equal. Is that the right way of doing things? Is it not? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. And it's not my business. But yeah, I can see why people can get that impression that the more money you make, the worse it is. So yeah, it's unfortunately that's kind of how it is.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring this up is not so much even on the financial thing, you know, like yourself, this is not my area of expertise whatsoever. But the thing that piques my interest is observing this whole thing of the structure, the societal structure trying to keep you in the same place, where, like we said, in a lot of the advertisement and things like that, they're trying to discourage you from improving yourself or doing better, or it's like, oh, you're beautiful just the way you are, and things like that. Obviously, like you said, you made a very good example earlier, actually, in the discussion, where you said that obviously if someone's got like cerebral palsy, or if they've got like a disability, then you got to embrace that and you got to work with that. But to what capacity can you still improve yourself? I mean, you made a post on this, which I thought was pretty interesting. So I'm going to ask you that question. Do you think that going to the gym will solve most of your problems?
Yes.
And if so,
yes.
Elaborate, please.
Okay, so the gym is one of the last bastions where it's kind of like an oasis in the desert, where the amount of work that you put in will be directly proportional to the amount of results that you get, at least in the very beginning. So what I mean when I say that, this for a lot of people, they might not notice. It might seem like this cannot be the case. Probably most people think that I was born with a big bench press and like a six pack, but in reality, that I, up until for the largest period of my life, in middle school and high school, I was the skinniest and shortest kid in class. I was the weakest kid, most athletically crippled, and so if anyone had the excuse to say, well, this is just the way that I am, I might as well just be mediocre for the rest of my life, that would have been me. But what ended up happening, I kind of had this perception of how a man is supposed to look like. Unlike most people, I don't have cool stories of like reading comic books and watching Conan. I just kind of had this general perception, like something drilled in the back of my head. So I started lifting weights and I started making changes. And that was the first step towards something greater. And now why do I say this? Is because, and why did I mention something that the most amount of work, the amount of results you will get is directly proportional to the amount of work that you put in. The gym is kind of one of the few places because it's your basic biology. So let's give you an example. When I was younger, because again I was skinny and short, especially that part skinny, still not very tall, 175 centimeters. But obviously I was a lot shorter when I was younger. And one of the things that I thought would get me taller was going and training basketball. Now, the thing with basketball is it's a skill-based sport. Now, obviously, if you put in enough work, you will get better at it. But it's legitimately a skill-based sport. So you can, if you just don't have the coordination, the talent to get better, you simply won't get that better. So I did get better at basketball slightly, but it wasn't anywhere near that. Now with the gym, it's a physiological process. You put in the work, you lift more weight, you create more mechanical tension than last time. You consume protein, you sleep, you wake up, the next day you do the same, you're gonna get bigger. It's impossible for that not to happen. Now, at a certain point, that threshold is gonna rise to the amount of what you have to do to create that stimulus to get bigger and stronger, but the stimulus exists. Now, whereas if we look at that example, let's say in a job, you can, objectively speaking, work in a tyrannical structure of a job where you put in extreme amounts of work, but your boss simply doesn't like you. And you're effectively going to not prosper and not move an inch. It doesn't matter how much you put in the work. And secondly, as soon as you see the results that you can achieve in the gym and the kind of how much you can change, because that's astronomical, it puts into perspective what else can be achieved. Because that's how it works for me. Again, I wasn't born in a wealthy country. I didn't go to college, so for the largest period of my life, I thought I was dumb as a bag of rocks, because that's kind of a lot of things made me believe that. But basically, I had all the things stacked against me. So if I changed one of those one of those variables that I thought couldn't be changed, what is to say that I couldn't change my financial situation, maybe my mental situation, the amount of knowledge that I can accumulate? So that is the first step. It's the easiest. It's the most applicable in all situations. And obviously, outside of all of that, objectively speaking, getting bigger, stronger, less, not getting, stripping the most amount of fat from your frame is going to benefit everything. Period.
Spot on, mate. I mean, here's a question. You are not perfect the way you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you can strive to be better every single day. I 100% relate to that. Obviously, I think a lot of the people who will be listening, they'll already probably know my story, or they'll have some awareness of it anyway. But just for the sake of the conversation, I used to be. I'm about. We're roughly about the same height. I've never met you in person, but I think I'm 174, if I'm correct. Like just beneath 5'9", I think, and I'm 27, by the way. And I used to be back in, I'm gonna say, February 2017, which was the last time that I actually got weighed as an obese person. I was 18.5 stone, which is about 118 kilograms. Yes, yeah, it is. And that wasn't in muscle. At that point in my life, I'd never even been to a fucking gym in my life. The most I'd done was go on treadmills and walk for 10 minutes and then go and fucking have a milkshake afterwards or some shit like that, But something switched, I started losing a little bit of weight in the coming few months after that, because I was having serious like health problems, mental problems, like you name it, like we always... yes, mental health and depression and things like that, that's a very, very complicated thing. But it's one of them things, like if you get your physical shit together, that will improve dramatically. Because I started the gym in October 2017. So I've been lifting for how long is it? I don't know how to do maths right now. It's just over
5 years.
Yeah. So I and on that first session, man, I went, and I've never shared this part of the story before, but the very first time I actually went to the gym, I went on one of the bikes. It was at nighttime. It was quiet. There wasn't many other people there. And I just sat on the bike for 30 minutes and I tried to do a bit of cardio. I was too scared to go near the weights or anything like that. And I felt like such shit that I actually got off the bike, went to the locker room, lied down on the bench, and I just cried because I couldn't believe how far away I was from what I needed to be, from where I needed to be, and from sort of observing other people. It was like, wow, there's all these people here. They all seem so normal. They're all going about their lives, and I feel like I have almost been sort of misplaced out of a fair life. Like I felt like it was really unfair that I was in that situation, and I stuck to it, man. I never quit. I stuck to it, and I think so when I first did like this whole transformation reveal thing, and you gotta keep this in mind as well. I did this without a coach, which I can say to anyone else out there, because obviously you're a coach yourself as well, and we'll get into that. But I can say to anyone else out there, make it easier on yourself and get a fucking coach, but don't expect results overnight, But back in, November 2020, that's when I sort of did the big reveal, and then I had dropped back down to 82 kilos from 100 and
30 plus kilos. Yeah. 78 pounds.
Yeah. So I was like, and that was like a bit of muscle as well, because I actually did majority of it from weightlifting, not going on fucking 10-mile cardios and shit, because I think that's the worst way to, lose weight if that's what you're trying to do.
It's unproductive. It lasts forever, and it's, objectively speaking, inferior way of doing it.
Yeah, because there's a point as well that I think a lot of people are, they think they're overweight, and yes, that is the case, but I think you are under-muscled first, definitely. Then you are overweight. And I think that is something that most people should probably try and have a better understanding of.
It actually works in tangent, because I always mention this, that you want to change your body composition. Now, what does that mean? Well, your body is made out of a lot of things, bone, organ, everything like that, but also it has muscle and fat. Now, you can effectively be the same weight And you could look much worse. Simply put, if the amount of fat that you're carrying is higher than the amount of muscle that you're carrying. Now, if we switch that up, and maybe you gain a little bit of muscle, and even you maybe even don't lose all that much fat, you're effectively going to have less body fat, because now a part more of your body is made from muscle instead of fat. So yeah, it's that is the case. Although with your personal experience, that part where you basically laid on the bench was probably the worst and the best period of your life ever, because it pushed you forward. It's kind of like one of those things, once you hit rock bottom, the only place that you can go is up. So
Exactly.
that probably happened to you.
Yeah, precisely, man. I would, yeah, very much so. I'm happy, like I wouldn't change a fucking thing, I mean, I have days now where I go in and I might even have a migraine, and then I've got a back session ahead of me, and then I'll still fucking do it. If I do a rep and it hurts more, I'm like, fuck you, bitch, let it hurt, fuck off, and just like, like it's that sort of mindset that, yeah, pain is good, give me more, because this is going to help me grow and develop, not just physically, but on a mental scale as well.
It's kind of like, I'm gonna be that guy, but it's kind of one of the things that when you start researching Nietzsche and kind of his philosophy and everything like that, if you go over his actual life, you'll see he had like quite a bit of traumatic experiences. Like he contracted, I think, was it syphilis? He wanted to marry 2 women, they declined him, etc., etc. So a lot of very bad things happened to him. And when you kind of research his thoughts on these subjects, he isn't even sorry for himself, because he believed that the more suffering he has, the more suffering happens to him, the more he will grow out of it. He even said, I feel bad for the other people who have life going for them, because they will never prosper. They will always remain the same. Whereas me, when I'm suffering, I will learn from it. Now, obviously, we don't want to take this to the extreme. I think we would all agree that we don't want to have an excessive amount of suffering, but obviously, a certain amount is definitely beneficial in the long run. It's kind of like one of those things, nothing inherently good happens without pain, suffering, or difficulties. Obviously, we would all agree that life would be much better without it. But since we cannot avoid it, we might as well at least use it to our own capacity and kind of use it for our own advantages.
To embrace it, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned. So I'm very interested in your definition of the word anabolic. Because obviously you mentioned Nietzsche and obviously the suffering that he went through, and that you look at this as a growth. How do you view that? What's your own sort of goals in terms of growth and things like that? What is it that you personally are trying to strive for?
Obviously, I have specific goals which are very much objective. They're not very much, there aren't things that we get to philosophize about the most. My current development and kind of what I want to achieve in the physical realm would probably be, I want to bench eventually. I want to bench 160 kilos paused. I'm kind of at around 155. I want to squat north of 200 kilos. And I want to deadlift over 240 kilos. So that's one of the first things. Second thing, I recently, over the past couple of months, I got into Muay Thai. So that's something also I want to get better at, something that I actually enjoy quite a bit. But unfortunately, because of the differences between me and my coach and kind of making sure our workouts fit, that's kind of starting to become a little bit difficult. But obviously, I want to improve on that. And also something that I also want to improve on is obviously my business ventures. But to be precise, not necessarily just for the sake of making money, but also on a creative aspect. I want to write more and I want to design more. I don't consider myself a designer, but over the past period, or maybe past couple of months, maybe a year, I've been kind of dabbling into kind of Photoshop and like design stuff, and kind of something that I enjoy quite a bit. And it's kind of like my creative expression. It's kind of one of the things that I've, for the first time, probably in kind of the guy who I would say we can associate with, and that's Jim Wendler. So he obviously wrote 531, but he said like one of the things he likes to do what he considers a good day is a day when he lifts weights or trains, reads and writes. So that's kind of his. It's kind of, he said, it's simple. I just need to train, write, and read, and I call that a good day. So it's kind of like, it works in tangent. So that those are some of the things that I'm striving for. But obviously, a lot of things that I'm working towards cannot probably be quantified, and I will probably never achieve them because unfortunately we die. But yeah, hopefully, progress for the sake of progress. Let's just put it like that.
You gotta aim for the stars to reach the top of the mountains.
Yeah. It's kind of like Tower of Babel kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, you mentioned about your designs and stuff. Actually, one thing that I really appreciate about what you're doing at the moment, and I recommend everyone to come and check out your page and everything. We'll obviously get it all linked up once the episode is out. But you do actually put a lot of time and effort, both in terms of the design, but also the information and in the layout of even just the sentence structures into your posts. So I can tell that is something that you are quite passionate about, and it's, you know what? It's quite easy to consume as well. It's easy to take in the information in such a way,
That, well, generally speaking, that's something you always want us to strive for. I mean, I've been doing the social media game for 4+ years, so I believe that if you're doing something, especially long term, and you aren't trying to develop it, it's kind of, for me, pointless. So the design aspect of it, the writing aspect, that's all something that I want to improve on. I tend to believe that one of the concepts that I'm really fascinated by is this idea of the complete man. This is something that probably I don't know how it struck me, but kind of I was we came up from a similar subculture. I was also into heavy metal, black metal, to be precise. Unlike you, I wasn't a musician. I was a musician. I was just a consumer, but nevertheless, I was in that niche. So I kind of came out of that. I came out not doing the things that those people tend to normally do, and I kind of went in this physical realm aspect, and I got some decent progress in that part. But I kind of felt something was off. Something, it's like a piece of the puzzle is missing. And only once I deeply started getting involved in writing first, then reading, and kind of mixing all of those things together, I understood that there is more to be done. I don't want to be like that one-trick pony. And one of the kind of, I've mentioned this previously, but this idea of promotion of a culture, I objectively believe that is the way out, because when I started lifting weights, when I started training, I know the culture that was present in the physical development realm, and we all know it. It's like these muscle-bopped meatheads, which I find cool, but they're kind of dumb as rocks, and they're kind of the people who are like, I lift things and put them down. So
it's like the corporate gym in dodgeball, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I kind of wanted to present this idea of like more of the people who have already done it, and kind of make that somewhat mainstream. The lifting weights isn't just for people who can only know how to count in 20-kilo plates. It should be the philosophers, it should be the writers, the authors, the designers. It should be like a place for everyone. It's kind of like it should be a part of everything you do. And even there was like even a Greek concepts like kalokagatia, kalos kagatos. It's kind of that idea of being articulate in speechcraft, but also knowing how to handle yourself in times of war. So that's also something that I'm really, really trying to go in that direction.
I think, yeah, absolutely. Because this is the fucking crazy thing about it as well. I think a lot of people who have never done it will look at it and think, oh, it's just a thing of ego and whatever. And there was like, what was it? There's that like famous interaction with Arnold. I think it's from a film, or someone actually said this. I don't remember the context of it, but someone said to him, oh God, I would never want to look like you. And he replied with, don't worry, you never will, and it's like that, because it's like, it's so much hard work. It's so much knowledge that you have to apply, and from every single muscle group, how you have to time your recovery, your sleeping, everything, it's a lot of fucking, it's a lot to take on that for me personally, going to the gym has actually helped me have a better understanding of life itself in a way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I said that going to the gym will fix most of your problems. But I mean, I often say that lifting weights is in quantum physics. Once you understand the basics of it, it tends to be pretty basic. But
Sure.
then again, if it was so easy, we would have seen a lot more people absolutely shredded, muscled up. But in reality, that isn't the case when you walk out outside. Not to offend anyone, hopefully, but you see the amount of body composition you see is like 1 minute mashed potatoes. So
Yeah.
it's obviously if it was that easy, it's something that a lot of people would actually achieve. It's the kind of the same thing that people say in terms of business. Every time someone is successful, they say, "Oh, I could have done that if I had like maybe money left from my grandfather or my father, or I could have done that if I was just this corrupt person, or I could have done that if X, Y, and Z." In reality, those are all justifications to why those people aren't really going up in any capacity, and it's kind of like the way they feel better about themselves because they give themselves a moral pretext to why they aren't achieving the things they could be achieving. It's kind of the same thing with people who talk shit about lifting weights, etc. It's like, oh, he must lift weights all so much because he has a small dick or something like that. Well, no, maybe just I want to get healthier and better and look better, but maybe the reason why you're attacking me so much is because this triggers some sort of inferiority complex because again you're built like a minute mashed potatoes. So it's kind of one of those things. I know and as you mentioned, it kind of influences every other part of your life. I started really approaching life like that in general. So if someone is successful, maybe the first thing you're gonna think about isn't that he's a spoiled jerk or something like that. Maybe he's just a really hard worker. Maybe he's a guy who works 12 hours every day. If you see someone who I don't know has I don't know, give or take, let's say an attractive wife, maybe he's maybe he didn't buy her, quote unquote. Maybe he just has a great personality. Maybe he's really charismatic. Maybe he just knows around people. Maybe he isn't a bad person for having the things that you want to have, but that you're hiding that you want to have. So that's like something that people oftentimes do. But yeah, again, as I said, going to the gym will fix most of your problems. Period.
I know. Well, I'll ask you this, okay? What would you say to someone who, let's say, is in my position that I was 4 or 5 years ago, who just wants to start? What would be your advice to that person who's sort of maybe done a little bit here and there, but then they struggle with a little bit of discipline? What would be your advice to them for a starting point?
I'm going to first give the biased answer, and then I'm going to give the answer kind of that you can implement in every other capacity. So the biased answer is obviously hire a coach. Now, that is obviously biased because I'm a coach. It's kind of like those people who are always talking about how because of the situation currently in Ukraine, that we should like supply them with weapons and everything like that. And that's it's always being promoted by weapons companies. So it's like, oh, who would have known? But basically, one of the reasons why I say that you want to get a coach is when you are entering a new realm, like let's say physical culture, physical training. It's all very new to you. You don't know really where to grasp, and generally speaking, in the very beginning, you're either going to ask for help from someone in the gym, which I know some people don't want to do, and also sometimes the advice that you're going to get in the gym is going to be horrible. Some of the worst advice I've ever got about training and nutrition was from the gym, and it was horrendous. So that's the first thing. The second option is that you're going to have to invest the time yourself. Now, for some people, that might not be a viable option. Maybe you're a school teacher. Maybe you have a job that you work for 12 hours every day. Maybe you work in a creative field, so you just cannot devote maybe 2 hours every day or trying to basically learn everything for 6 months. So for you, a better option is just to hire someone who has the knowledge that you require. It's kind of the same thing as like if my car breaks down, I can obviously try to see and fix the problem myself and kind of Google and kind of see like this. But then again, there's also going to be a chance that I'm going to break my car and lose 6 months of my time. Or I could just go to a mechanic who does that for a living. So that's the first thing. Now, if let's say you're financially crippled and you just cannot afford it, or maybe you don't want to do it for some reason, I give a couple of important rules. These rules aren't necessarily what you should or shouldn't do in the gym, but kind of lifestyle adaptations to where it facilitates the growth that you can experience in the gym. The first one being, start easy. Don't be that person who's going to go to the gym every day. No. If you never went to the gym, go 3 times a week. That's more than enough. Stay for 45 minutes, an hour. Just breathe the sweat-infested and testosterone-infested air in the gym. Be in that habitat. Mm-hmm. Learn what is a barbell. Learn what is a squat rack. Learn the differences between plates. Just do that. Second of all, don't look for quick programs. Look for lifestyle adaptations. Meaning, don't go into the gym and ask, what's the best diet for me to lose weight? Because some guys are going to say keto, some guys are going to say carb cycling, some guys are going to say carnivore, some guys are going to say Mediterranean, etc., etc., etc. You need something that's beneficial for you. So first of all, and then also, same thing can be in a program in the gym. You can, maybe the best case scenario would be to lift 5 or 6 times a week, but maybe that's not beneficial for you. Maybe because you cannot make it 5 to 6 times a week in the gym. So those are the 2 most important things. And 3, you want to set goals. And I wouldn't want to say be realistic, because I don't want your goals to be low. You should eventually, if you want to strive to look like Arnold, because that's something that's going to protect you to actually go to the gym in the long term. But have realistic goals. If I always say, in order for you to bench 2 wheels, you need to bench 1 wheel first. So give yourself like these, like I call these like the marks of war. Give yourself these like mini strategies that you can absolutely achieve in a certain time frame. First strategy: go to the gym 3 times a week for an entire month. That's step number 1. Second strategy: try to bench, I don't know, half of your body weight if you're a little bit skinnier. If you are normally built, try to bench your body weight. That's the second step. Third step, I don't know, maybe try to train a little harder. Maybe give yourself like these quantifiable steps that you can objectively achieve. And only once you do that, you'll eventually get into the groove of things. So again, it's a little bit tricky, but just don't complicate it. Often, and I always say, the good thing about being an amateur and being new to all of this is literally anything that you do will guarantee progress. I oftentimes say that inhaling the air that's in the gym is going to make you put on muscle. Not because of the Trembolone and Deca, but just being in that environment. So that's the first thing.
Sure. No, I think that's great advice, man. I mean, when I first started myself, I was doing something like, even if I was slacking the whole week, I would still make sure that I went one day just to do like a full body workout and stuff, because that was just like, I just wanted to keep the habit. I was like, okay, even if I'm not making progress, I still want to keep the habit. But honestly, like you say, that first 6 months to a year that you start, the difference is fucking crazy. For me, it was difficult because I would see and feel the difference in terms of the actual workouts. But as far as physical composition, it took me a very long time to actually see any difference, So that really only happened once I'd actually built some muscle, and then I started to burn down the fat and then get rid of that, and then now, at the moment, it's just sort of like maintenance deficit. I reached the perfect level, and then, we go up from there. But yeah, I think that's fucking great advice, man. So I think, the point of some of the chats that I try to have on here as well, obviously I said to you in the messages before as well, actually, that obviously most of the people I have got lined up for this are black metal musicians and those kind of people. But I feel that what you're preaching and what you're saying is very highly compatible with the thing that I'm trying to say. Obviously, preach is not the right word, but most of just sort of
the black metal people are going to get triggered.
I know, right? Good. I think a lot of black metal people need to get triggered because they're too comfortable. I mean, we're on the subject now. So, what's your sort of background in that subgenre? Has that in any way actually helped you sort of develop into the whole gym thing, or is that just like a
without a doubt?
Yeah, it has
without a
helped.
doubt. So basically, I always had certain interests that I later on realized that all tie in together. So when I was very, very young, even up to this day, I was super into history. Like one of the first things that I was into regarding history was ancient Egypt. Like that was my thing. Like I really loved ancient Egypt, and then I kind of investigated the mythology and everything like that. So obviously you can see some of the patterns. So I went into that. I kind of like these like aggressive, darker things, and I kind of didn't have a kind of a real idea of what's going on. So the first actual music, and this is something that most people don't know, is the first music I got into was actually gangster rap. Because gangster rap was that first aggressive music that was like, oh, okay, this is something that I like. Like this is like has aggression. This is like has a background to it. This is what I enjoy. And then eventually I kind of got into metal, Black Sabbath and things like that. I kind of always knew that I liked that music. I just didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. So I got into that. And again, all of those things kind of worked in tangent. So I liked history, I liked mythology, I liked that aggressive kind of stuff. So I eventually got into music. I eventually discovered black metal. I was like, well, this actually fucks. Like, this is excellent. Yeah. So, and then actually, obviously, I kind of tied into those two subcultures. I always said that gangster rap was in the United States, and then the Norwegian black metal was in Europe. Because I saw those two, the parallels between those two things. Now, kind of getting older, I realized that the crowd in the Norwegian black metal wasn't as, let's just say, let's just say 50 Cent would call them wanksters, so wannabe gangsters. But basically, I saw the parallels between that. And also, one of the things that I really liked about black metal was the fact that it was like kind of this aggressive, this very, very much, how should I say, deeper sense of music. That's something I really appreciated. So I was obviously listening to death metal, thrash metal, etc., stuff like that. But the thing with that is that they're kind of talking about topics that are kind of okay, but I'm kind of interested in a lot of other things: mythology, philosophy, history, etc. So it got into that, and that's eventually also when I started lifting weights. And kind of one of the reasons why the first kind of, I would say, cognitive dissonance in my personality was like, I like this music, which is objectively, I would say, the most complete music in the sense of what I'm listening, what I'm asking from it. But then again, the crowd that is in this subgenre, in this niche, is very, how should I say, different. So
I know what you're trying to say.
It's like, how much can you sing about murder and Satan if you're skinny fat? It's one of those things that I didn't really understood, and then I started lifting weights, and kind of it actually made a lot more sense to kind of channel that interest into the other interests, and then everything started fitting and making sense. And then kind of when I started posting my own, like I know this might sound silly for a lot of people, but I started lifting weights 7 or 8 years ago. So. And everyone, when they're young, when they're into bodybuilding, powerlifting, generally this type of stuff, they always, especially when they're younger, when they're new to this, they like those like motivation videos. So you see these bodybuilders and they're training, and you're like, fuck yeah, I want to be like that. And they're all like training to electronic music or R&B or it's like why is it like this? And then when I started, and then I realized that after I started, I think a lot of people felt the same as I did, because someone just needed to bring those two subcultures together. And eventually, when it started happening, when I started posting my training and kind of saw that I wasn't some douchebag gym bro who listens to, I don't know, electronic music, who goes to raves and that kind of stuff, and then I saw a lot of people actually getting like interested in that niche as well. So as I said, kind of go back in that original topic, that cultural shifts, I actually saw it in real time. So now it's actually not that uncommon to see people like, I don't know, blasting the new Funeral Mist while doing squats. So that's something that I actually really enjoyed, because I objectively think that those two things can effectively, if just approached in that capacity.
Sure, man. Sorry, I think you just got cut out there for just 1 second, but I think we're good. So what were some of the bands that maybe initially piqued your interest in that? like what were you actually into, or what? I mean, normally what we get into at first, that's what we carry on listening to, and then most other things are fucking shite, So what were sort of like your bands, like your go-tos, that also were very good, a good fit, I should say, to the lifting culture that you mentioned?
Well, actually, the first bands that I kind of in that heavier sphere that I got into was probably Black Sabbath. That's like the first band that I got into. I still love Black Sabbath up to this day. And obviously I listen to Slayer, Metallica, and things like that. But as I eventually transitioned kind of more into that, I always say that I don't listen to black metal, like only black metal. I listen to quite a lot of other things, but it's kind of like it's that genre of music that has everything that I want to, and kind of if I'm gonna like a certain type of music, it's probably gonna be in that field. So I was always into Marduk. Battery was probably my favorite band for the longest period of time. I'm gonna commit sacrilege, and I'm gonna say that Nordland is my favorite album ever. So it's not.
Oh wow!
The first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right
Nordland was like the best album I ever heard from them. Obviously, I like Mayhem. Seeing them live a couple of years ago was also excellent. But yeah, and also Nargaroth. That's those kind of like bands that I really liked, especially Nargaroth in like certain periods was really cool. Dark Throne, etc. But currently, I would say, I gotta say, I'm done with listening to 144p music. I don't want to listen to music that sounds like it's recorded in a bathroom. I just can't. But recently, I gotta say, what I was listening to recently was obviously the new Funeral Mist. Obviously, like anything that those guys in good old Sweden make.
Mortis knows his shit, man. Yeah.
Fantastic musicians. Like as my friend said, Marduk never released a bad album, and they also, and in my opinion, they stayed true to what this subgenre of music should be: unapologetic. When they had their problems, they said, no, we don't care. This is our music. We dictate the rules. If you don't like it, that's fine. So
I mean, you gotta admire the consistency, man. I mean, I'd love to speak to them about this, but the consistency is fucking insane. Like how many years they've been doing that, and the grinds of the road, and then yet still be like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Like that degree of tunnel vision, you never see that. You rarely see that in anything, let alone like a subgenre of music. I think it's very highly commendable.
That is
it just happens to be pretty enjoyable as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And also, which is consistently good. They never had dips or something like that. Obviously, originally I liked the Marduk era with Legion on the vocals, but eventually, as I started, but eventually, when I got into when I got into more of the Mortis stuff, it's difficult not to like it. I oftentimes now say that the new Funeral Mist album that they just released can be effectively a new genre. It's like when I heard it the first time, I was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
and then like especially like the vocals, it was like Jesus Christ. But yeah, anything those guys up in Sweden make. Now obviously I gotta flex the Serbian band, so the Stone. I really like them. They're probably effectively one of my favorite bands ever, not just because they're Serbian, but objectively speaking, because I like them quite a bit. So I've been there kind of on a heavy rotation. I don't know, my friends from Beis Mahash, listen to them quite a bit. But yeah, basically, I'm definitely not into the black metal that was. It was cool when it happened in the 90s, but there can only be one Dark Throne. There can only be one under the sign of the Black Mark. I am not a fan of like always doing the same thing. Now, obviously, I can understand you're trying to fit in a certain genre.
I mean,
but there has to,
sorry to interrupt you there, but just on the note of Dark Throne, they never released the same album twice themselves.
Yeah, exactly. You know how much people were pissed off when they started making those cross-punk albums? Because and what did Fenders say? Well, it's like that's kind of what it was kind of cool that we're kind of doing something else. So that's something that I believe also. It's kind of like there is a, and also like there is a Dark Medieval Europe Satyricon can only happen once. If I see 10,000 more people with corpse paint and knives and things like that, it's like doesn't sit well with me. It's like the same thing about singing about Satan and 666. This again, it made sense in a certain period because that was the thing to do. That was like the great counterculture. That was like giving the middle finger to everyone. But now, again, there are bands that can absolutely do it. I think the new, God help me if I pronounce it correctly, Offer Mode. I don't know how you pronounce it. But
I think that's kind correct. From Finland, right?
Yeah, they're the Offer Mode.
They're like sort of in the whole orthodox black metal.
Yeah. But for instance, they're doing the Satan thing correctly. I like how they're doing it. The Hexen, obviously. So I like it like that. But they have, again, a specific way of doing things. So that's something that I like. But again, the 90s only happened in the 90s. I think we need to make our own era and stop daydreaming about the past. This is talking from someone who's not a musician, obviously.
But if you even think about it, how Satan was it truly in the 90s? You know what I mean? It was mostly the vibe was a lot closer to the gangster rap thing that you mentioned. I want it
to be like that.
Not replicable, but I think that was kind of what it was. But you mentioned about like a lot of the kids, like doing the same thing and stuff. I think for a lot of us, it's a matter of, being an artist. The most important thing that I've learned from being an artist and a musician is that the whole journey, when I reflect on it, it's almost been a tool for me to get to know myself more than anything. Like sitting at the back of a car in pitch black darkness at 3 a.m. when you've just played a show in absolute noise and you look out the window and you see nothing but pitch blackness, so you've said whatever you had to say on stage, you let all your energy out, and now you're seeing the world for what it is. I think those are the, I cherish those moments a lot that I've had in my life because it allows you to know yourself. And I think in the case of like a lot of these kids that you mentioned, that are doing the same thing, it's kind of, from a consumer perspective, it's a little bit annoying to see everyone doing the same shit, but also in a way, I sort of see the positive in that as well, in that I see that these are kids that are obviously influenced by something that is quite majestic. Black metal is pretty fucking cool, but also they're trying to now exercise their own identity through that. The trouble is not everyone makes it all the way through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The circle definitely is sort of like not complete in that one lifetime. But it's interesting. But you see this even with the actual, with a lot of black metal artists, because there's the space in which the music itself exists in. And that music is something very explosive, very powerful, very aggressive, very projectile in a way. But a lot of times I find that, controversial statement, but I find that a lot of those musics that when they're at their best is a result of sort of unresolved issues and insecurities within the artist that creates the best of those compositions. Because like you mentioned yourself, you look at some of the people who like go to the shows or play the shows, and like I said, they're skinny fat motherfuckers, like with little discipline. They're so sensitive emotionally, and there's like all of these things. So there is a thing to that. I think we find it for a reason, but once you do, I think, put everything together, because it does go very much hand in hand with like being more explosive and stuff. And as far as not in an Allahu Akbar way, but mostly in like a, just like weightlifting, being strong and then self-betterment kind of way. It does go hand in hand.
It works perfectly in tangent. It's like that. I always give an example of going in a completely different direction, but also you have that in Britain, like the hooligan firms. That's a perfect example. The perfect example of unbelievable energy, unbelievable passion, even discipline, so to say, even the amount of bravery that goes. I've seen those things in person, like the fights between those guys, the fact that they're breaking each other's skulls all the time. That takes a specific amount of bravery. It takes a significant even amount of love. You have to love something to be able to literally break someone's skull over it, or to have your skull broken by someone else. Now, imagine if that was channeled into something different. Same thing about the entire black metal thing. So instead of actually instead of actually using that as a self-destructive mechanism, like most people are doing it, you can go in a completely opposite way. Because it's like somewhat the methods at which you achieve both things. So self-destructive, life denying, and self-constructive or life asserting things, the methods are identically the same. It's only at which direction you go and the dosages at which you do them are exactly the same. Both things require an immense amount of, I would even want to say, discipline, because you have to be disciplined in order to fuck yourself off every night listening to a specific kind of music, either by smoking crack, smoking weed, or something like that, and also going to the gym. And also the same energy that is devoted to actually researching the music, and especially like if you're a musician, creating the music and channeling all of that and kind of like as a transferable value into everything else you do is of immense capabilities. So if only channeled in the correct places, I believe that it will bring something incredible.
Absolutely. I think that is probably, I dare say, the main reason why what we do, not just in black metal, but all subgenres of metal, like death metal and all that, that is probably the main reason why it is as popular as it is, because it's a healthy outlet for people. You know, you got anger inside you, and then you get to project this out in a healthy way that doesn't really hurt anyone. You know, okay, yeah. You do your satanic ritual and now everyone is fucking cursed, you know, and fucking, you know, like, yeah, okay, you could go into that territory, but yeah, generally speaking, it's something that is, I think, really positive if you look at it, you know, because it's like, you look at everyone who goes to the shows as well, everyone's wearing their like leather jacket and they're the fucking stand there, you know, and it's like they're looking at each other, but there's like, that is in itself, it's like everyone's like that. So there's like already a weird sense of community where everyone is acting the same, but inside they're having the same fulfillment as probably the people who go to the church and go hallelujah shit, you know.
People need a sense of community. People want to belong somewhere. That's human nature. It's like we always hear these things like, oh, tribalism is bad. Like we should be individuals. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, you should be an individual, a positive individual inside a community, because effectively that's how humans function in their essence. Like even in the animal kingdom, there are very few animal species that operate alone, because operating alone means a certain death. Now, obviously, we don't have to hunt for survival anymore, but we still have that ingrained in the back of our skulls, in our DNA, to be a part of something, to be a part of a culture. It's the same as you mentioned, people going to church. One of the reasons why Christianity and basically any religion in the world existed is because it offered a community. It kind of bounded people together into something that they can, in a shared identity. So it's the same thing in this, like, but what does that identity lead you to? Is it going to lead you to drugs, alcohol, and kind of like feeling sorry about yourself? Like in reality, like it is in most of the aggressive music that we find out there. Is it going to be in the sense of like, I don't know, this idea of turning the other cheek in Christianity, or like, I don't know, this false sense of accomplishment for the sake of being absolutely nothing? Will it lead you in that direction? Or will you actually take something positive out of it and channel into something different? If you're going to have that aggressive outlook of life, use it for something positive, like aggressively dislike what you are now, but like what you can be in the future. Aggressively fight for a better position of yourself. And it doesn't make you evil, because if you are, always say something, if you are in a position where you are above the average person, that means you're in a position to help the average person. But if you're all swimming in a pile of shit, no one can help each other. So it's like, it's you want to help yourself just so that you have the ability to help others. It's basically that simple. And if you can use this subgenre and subculture for that's perfect. But if you're going to be like one of those guys who always just complains and uses this as a tool for like self-destruction, that's up to you. You have the tools at your disposal.
Absolutely. And it's your responsibility, isn't it? Your life is your responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, completely off topic here, but you just sparked off something in my head that I wanted to ask you about anyway. obviously, you mentioned the whole thing about identity, you know, and then we talked about the whole hooligan thing in football and stuff like that. Obviously, with yourself being positioned in Serbia, obviously you still have Romania in between you, but what are your thoughts and you know, sort of perspective on the current situation that's happening at the moment?
In Romania?
Ukraine.
Oh, I understood Romania.
Yeah, I said
Regarding
Romania because it's Romania is between
okay.
Serbia and Ukraine on the map, or at least I think it is.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, we're bordering everyone, so it's kind of like everyone is near us. Hungary, Romania, etc. Now the situation in Ukraine, it's tragic. For the sake of a better word, it's tragic. What can I say that would make it any better? I believe that this is a conflict that should have never happened, and this conflict will probably is going to be the nail in the coffin between the East and the West. Now, we define West however you want to. Is Poland West? Probably is now. I don't think it's kind of a tragic thing because I view myself as Serbian, so that means I'm Slavic. Seeing Slavs so divided doesn't seem right with me. It's like we're the only ethnic group in Europe, as far as I know, which hates its guts so much. The Germanics don't hate themselves that much. The Scandinavians don't hate themselves that much. Now I can say our Anglo-Saxons or English people, Germanic, probably, yeah. They're probably a mix, but they don't hate each other that much. But it's always the Slavs. It's Russians, Ukrainians, Russians, Polish, Serbs, Croats. Every time I see it, and I was always one of the things that I despise is this, I should say, this cheerleading approach and I gotta be I might offend someone, but this cheerleading approach from a lot of Westerners. Yeah, Ukraine, fuck up those Russians, or yeah, Russians, fuck up those Ukrainians. Like, whoever wins, no one wins.
Yeah,
I always said, like, if I'm sorry to break people's feelings, but Ukraine isn't going to win. They're not. I know this because we experienced the same thing similarly. We had an immense superpower bombing the hell out of us, and no one came to our aid. We had international law broken so they could bomb us, and no one came to our aid. And NATO won, but we lost. And we lost, and it doesn't even, the same thing is going to happen in Ukraine. They're going to probably, the West is going to push them for even stronger conflict with Russians because they don't like the interests of Russia. A lot of Ukrainians are going to die. I hope Russians won't intensify their attack. Who knows? Maybe that will happen. But effectively, I think if this is basically, I always say this to people because the powers that be will always fight to the last Ukrainian. Yeah. I'm sorry to say this, and we can see this by what's going on in Yemen, Syria, Libya, Iraq. Us, Eastern people, are worth less than the Westerners. If Kiev was burning, that would be only the news because they can blame Russia. But if, let's say, another Western country attacked Kiev, that will be nowhere on the news, like when the Western countries attacked Syria, Libya, Iraq. That will be nowhere in the news because Baghdad burning or Kiev burning, or in our case, Belgrade burning, doesn't value the same as Paris burning, or London burning, or Lisbon burning. So I think the West is effectively going to push Ukraine into a stronger conflict with Russia, just for the sake of weakening Russia, and they don't care what happens with Ukraine afterwards. If they wanted to fix this problem, they would have all went to the negotiation table. The leaders of the G7, 8, or 9, or whatever the fuck they are, they would sign a document. They would entitle Russia to pay off the expenses of the war, to help rebuild Ukraine. They would ensure neutral status for Ukraine. They would do something, but no, they don't want to do that because they're using this. This is like a typical example of enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't really care what happens to the enemy of my enemy as long as my enemy is getting the worst of it. So hopefully the conflict ends as soon as possible. I'm not cheering for anyone. It's kind of pointless.
There's no good sides. That's why.
No. I watched a couple of videos recently from Kharkov and not Odessa, but Kharkov and a couple of other places in Ukraine. It's fucked up when you see a 6-year-old child dying because of a shrapnel entering his skull.
Yeah.
And people who are 80 and not having to hide in metro stations. Then again, it's also shitty to see people in Donbass being bombed to oblivion with weapons provided by the Western powers. As soon as it ends, the better it will be. But I fear that this conflict was the nail in the coffin for a lot of the Eastern-Western relations, and I think it won't get better anytime soon.
Do you have any concerns directly based off of your current geographical location and where you're based?
I don't think anything will happen with us, Serbia, that is, at least not militarily. The biggest issue is obviously Serbia is, this is not really anything new, but Serbs and Russians have a really positive opinion about each other because Russians were the only ones who had our backs when we had our problems. So Russia is the only, outside of Belarus, and if we count Turkey, is the only European country which hasn't sanctioned Russia. There are now some pressures about potentially pressing us to sanction Russia. Who knows what will happen? Again, it's a tricky subject. In the very beginning, I was kind of optimistic somewhat that it would end really fast. I mean, I don't know how much that is going to be a reality nowadays.
It's over a month now, man. I think we're in it for the long run, probably, because chances are, I mean, not to go like so gloomy and everything, but it's just like, I think it's probably good to have an understanding of things, and it's that it's really important to reflect on history first of all when observing a situation like this, but also to understand that, I don't know, it's like you said, it should have just never happened, because it's like, how do you then reason? How do you then try and explain, like, okay, well, actually, these people are doing this, those people are doing that. Yes, what the United States did here was absolutely fucking wrong. They should be held accountable for it. But what you are also doing here is completely fucked up. You should not be doing that. You've just started something that's, gonna basically fuck with every single one of us, and who's in the middle? Innocent people. Even the soldiers, and I'm gonna go out on a fucking limb here, but like, it's the soldiers on both sides. It's not just all of the males in Ukraine who've been forced to fucking stay behind and fight and everything like that, where there's like, obviously many of them didn't fucking want to do that. Like we said earlier, you just want to get on with your life. But then there's also a lot of like the 18-year-old Russian soldiers. Like, what the fuck is an 18-year-old going to know about anything? You know what I mean? They've just been manipulated.
They said that they were doing drills.
Yeah, they thought that it was just a drill. That's right. It was just like a normal exercise. And then all of a sudden, here we go. Like, fucking boom. It's insane, man. It's extremely sad. Yeah.
One of a good comment was that Ukraine isn't to blame for the fact that the United States and the Western allies bombed half of the Middle East to oblivion. That is true. The fact that the United States did that doesn't justify Russia doing that, and that's exactly the point. None of them should be. Yeah. They said something in the lines that the Russian government, Duma, and everyone involved should face war crimes. Okay, I can get behind that. Now half of the West should also.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not going to happen. I think what we could extract from all of this is kind of like, we aren't Putin, we aren't Zelensky, we aren't Macron, we aren't Johnson. So we aren't going to affect world events. But what you can affect is kind of your preparation for all of this, and maybe your reaction towards all of this. It's kind of like one of the we spoke about earlier, this idea that men don't need to train, that we are the good way we are, money is evil, strength is unnecessary, etc., etc., etc. And that's, and okay, if they might be correct in a contemporary peaceful age and in a country which has never seen conflict. But what if you believe that and you are now in Ukraine, or you are maybe in Libya, or maybe you are the Russian who who lost his job because half of the Western companies have left? What are you going to do now? You're going to be like, you're going to be in a very bad situation. But if you're kind of the person who's kind of somewhat prepared for this, same thing happened with COVID. When it happened, I told people, like, one of the first things that I'd never understood was how many companies filed for bankruptcy in the first month of the COVID lockdowns. I said, so wait, you don't have the funds to operate a month without like any influx of cash. How does that function? The fact of the matter is, people got too comfortable and they believe everything that's being thrown at them. And eventually, when things go south, then we revert to all of the things that have naturally worked for thousands of years. So it's kind of one of those things. I don't dislike the entire political debate. I dislike the entire like contemporary debate. I always say one thing: revert to the things that have worked for thousands of years. If they have worked and they have been proven to work in countless cultures, countless times in history, in multiple scenarios, they have probably existed for a reason. Just recently, I listened to the part, but I love it. Dan Carling's Hardcore History, and one episode was like about the Celts during the Roman invasion. And interestingly, they said that the Celts probably had a standard of fitness in that time, and that is that the belly wasn't supposed to hang lower than the belt line.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Well, because if the Roman soldier then decides to invade and you're a fat slob, you're probably not going to be able to hold your spear. So if they valued physical fitness in like 1st century BC, who's to say that you are now above that?
Absolutely, man. You know, it's like the whole case of like everyone just being like afraid. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna get drafted and shit, you know. And it's like, mate, you're, you're an out of shape motherfucker.
Maybe you will, bitch. And now what are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? You read my mind on where you went with that, by the way, because I was actually going to say, well, what is the lesson from this? Then, you know, what can we do? You know, as sort of like the average people or the pawns or whatever. But as who we are, I think you're absolutely right. The best that we can do, we can't go and change the mind of some fucking lunatic politicians, you know, or whatever, you know, where they're not isolated from the world, but from like their own people. You know, you can't go and reason with someone like that. You know, so the best we can really do is just try and be prepared and try to try to embrace that little bit of suffering, that little bit of pain, just so we can make for better quality of life, to make ourselves better, to just, and then be humble about it as well, you know, and then do what we can to look after ourselves and the people around us.
We live in the most comfortable time of human existence, and that shouldn't be taken for granted, because anytime that can be taken away. That has been proven in Kiev. That has been proven again in Moscow. Again, if you're a Russian artist, you officially lost your job. PayPal isn't working. Your credit card isn't working. Most companies aren't operating.
You haven't got access to OnlyFans anymore.
Yeah, that's the sign of the end times.
But
who's to say that a similar situation won't befall, let's say, the United Kingdom? We all know prices are going to go up. We all know the implications of what that can mean. Oil, gas. What are you going to do about that? Now, you can say, well, if you're one of those millionaire politicians or like what's the name of it? TV hosts, which I absolutely adore. And when they're saying like, oh, just buy an electric car because I have 5 million in my bank account, but maybe you won't have the 5 million in your bank account. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You thought all of your life that money is evil, that achievement is evil. Now you're going to suffer for it.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And I think to that point, I think I'm going to end the episode here because I think we made a fantastic speech here. But just before we go off as well, is there anything you'd like to plug to the audience at all?
Best I can say is observe and embrace natural law. There is a big difference between good and bad, and evil and good. Try to be good. What is good? That is which is life asserting. Lift weights, get knowledgeable, make money, help people along the way, and your life is gonna go up tenfold.
That's fantastic, man. And anywhere, is it with Legion where people can support yourself and through Anabolic Outlaw coaching, correct?
Yes. So Anabolic Outlaw coaching is obviously my primary business. That is where I obviously help people lose weight, get stronger, build muscle, lose fat. You can contact me either on my email, so that is anabolicoutlawcoaching@gmail.com, or obviously you can find me on my Instagram. My current handle is UncleVBWB AOC, or you can, I think, just write Warboss AOC and I should jump up. Or if you want to find my other company, that's Legionware. So you can just Google Legionware and you will find us. Or you can also type Legionware Europe or Legionware Shop in Instagram. You'll find us there. So there are ways to find us.
Fantastic. I wish you the very best of luck, man. And I just wanted to thank the audience as well. Thank you all for checking out the episode, and we'll see you on the next episode.